Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Better Care Forum. I'm Tom Harrell and tonight's theme is Advocacy and Action. We are fortunate to have with us three guests tonight. We have Donna Kalame, Executive Director of the San Francisco IHSS Public Authority. Welcome, Donna.
Happy to be here.
We have Tony Sauer, Executive Director of the Nevada Sierra Regional IHSS Public Authority. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Tom.
And we have with us Nancy Seiden, who is the chair of the Yolo County IHSS Advisory Committee and has been since its inception in 2000. Currently, she works with the Research and Training Center in Neuromuscular Diseases at the University of California at Davis in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation Research. Thank you for being here, Nancy.
Thank you.
I want to start off with a very simple but perhaps complicated at the same time question, which is just what is advocacy?
Well, in my mind, advocacy is trying to persuade some other person or entity of something that is right or of some need. I really see that there are three kinds of advocacy. One would be group advocacy, advocating for an issue. One would be personal advocacy, advocating for something you need, such as medical equipment, and the other would be legal advocacy, trying to take a legal route to try to get what you need.
And have you found that any one or the other is more effective, or do all three need to be used in conjunction to try and achieve? Of course, for personal advocacy, you're trying to achieve a discrete, purpose, I suspect. You say to get some kind of medical equipment or medical treatment, something like that. And then there's kind of the more larger the group / legal advocacy. Have you engaged in all three of those?
Yes, I have. And I think for people with significant disabilities, it can be a struggle to get what you need. But when we look at IHSS, I think we're looking at sort of a group advocacy. For example, for the last two previous years, there was a move to cut the wages back to minimum wages, and those of us on advisory committees, for example, our advisory committee, we wrote a letter to the Board of Supervisors and asked them to please write a letter to the governor and our representatives in Sacramento, which they did, so we were very successful on that. But in addition, throughout the state, people went to Sacramento and advocated against opposing the reduction in wages because of the devastating effects that it would have on people's lives.
Well, we have two executive directors of IHSS public authorities. Is advocacy part of your job, or are you, as a public authority, are you not at least technically supposed to engage in open advocacy? I assume you're always an advocate for budget increases and that kind of thing.
Well, I think it really depends on the county that you're from, I mean, the parameters, but my thought, and it's probably legally, is that we're getting paid with public funds, so we have to be very careful about doing advocacy, particularly any sort of lobbying. But there are times when we do education. We'll help our local representatives understand the issue so they can make an informed decision. But I think you have to really watch that line. There are other folks in the community, such as independent living centers, such as advisory boards, and just folks who are receiving the service who should be doing the advocacy because it affects them directly.
Sure. And are there certain, you mentioned a few, are there certain allies like in the community that you can coordinate with or rely upon to try and carry that message when you may not be technically able to do it yourself?
Well, I think I remember the rallies we had in Sacramento the previous 2 years. We did not have any cuts proposed this year to IHSS, which was a good thing. But we had a supervisor from Yolo County who took it upon herself to come and advocate and was a very strong advocate of IHSS. In the county where I live, Nevada County, we had the Board of Supervisors who tend to be conservative in their makeup, who understand the value of IHSS, and they wrote a letter opposing the cuts that were proposed by the administration. So I think IHSS, because the program is really cost effective and it affects most of us, we all know somebody with a disability who's impacted by it, it's pretty easy to get support, and you're really educating the legislature to say, listen, this is really pound wise, penny foolish to, or penny foolish, pound wise, whatever it is, to cut a program that is so cost effective. And it's really good. It's really easy to get that support when they understand the value of the program and you explain it to details. So I don't call that advocacy. I call it educating them and let them make up their own mind.
Donna, any difference in San Francisco? Or?
I think I do have a little bit different take on it. The whole in-home supportive services program grew out of, to me, from my understanding, consumers of personal assistance and home care who really wanted to retain a lot of autonomy and choice. And so the whole way even that the IHSS program is structured in California supports that consumer-driven, self-direction, consumer choice kind of philosophy. It basically fits in very tightly with an independent living philosophy about autonomy and independence for people with disabilities as long as possible. And as then public authorities came on board, one of the major parts of public authorities is that either they can have a board that has a majority of consumers, or if they don't have that, they at least have to have an advisory committee that has a majority of consumers. So when the state legislature created IHSS and then followed on with the creation of the possibility of public authorities, they may not have known that they were lighting a little firecracker as much as, to me, has and should occur. But I think they did anticipate that they wanted to hear very clearly from the consumer point of view. And public authorities, another one of their major roles is, it's a highfalutin phrase, employer of record for purposes of collective bargaining. But before public authorities existed, the consumer and worker were isolated dyads scattered around the community. With the inception of public authorities, where they've been established and now they're throughout the state, the workers have a voice through being able to be unionized under a public authority as employer of record. And as I say, the consumers are supposed to have and develop a voice from their perspective. So those two groups together, to me, I think Tony's right, technically advocacy and education and persuasion kind of all mesh together, but I think public authorities, from my point of view, and I'm lucky to be in a county where it's shared that we do serve a function of very high education about the significance of this program, why it's so crucial in the lives of both the consumers and the workers who are affected by it.
Well, it goes back to our initial question about what is advocacy. As you point out, I mean, education probably is sometimes the most effective form of, quote, advocacy, unquote, as you educate people as to the benefits of in-home support services on a cost basis, and of course the human benefits of allowing people to have the kind of autonomy and success that flows from that.
I think it's also important, though, for consumers with disabilities to have a voice in the services that affect them. And the advisory committee that's been created in the counties have really allowed consumers to begin to have a voice in how services are developed or what needs to be developed. Both they're supposed to be providing under AB 1682 recommendations to their board supervisors, to other entities such as IHSS and the public authority. But consumers still need to have a voice.
And when it comes to personal advocacy, I mean, are there certain kinds of success strategies that you have used? I don't know if it's 10 phone calls a day, or a letter writing campaign, or just simply being visible in the community. I mean, what are some ways that someone, kind of an individual, can feel like they can make a difference, if only in achieving some kind of service for themselves?
I think personal advocacy has become very, very complex in today's medical climate, with physicians as gatekeepers and insurance companies hard to get through. So, for example, my wheelchair stopped working, and when I made the phone call, it used to be that they would do maintenance on wheelchairs. Periodic maintenance, and the wheelchairs would last much longer. But today, what they're doing for maintenance is really nothing, in my opinion and my experience. And when my chair wouldn't go and I made the phone call, they said, well, it'll be about 3 weeks. Well, I'm a respiratory quad, and I need to be able to get to suction equipment. I need to be able to plug my respirator in. So this was a serious issue for me. I see it as a life and death issue, and yet the people on the other end of the line was, I'm sorry, it'll take 3 weeks. And this is just a wheelchair. And to get a wheelchair replaced, because my wheelchair is very complex and will soon need to be replaced, I'm very concerned because insurance companies are only giving you choices of what the medical companies are promoting. And so you don't see what the array of wheelchair choices are. You have to go with what they're allowing you to go with. And my chair is this is very complex. Not everybody, every company even has the expertise to be able to produce a chair like this. So I'm very concerned on what the next round, and there seem to be barriers at every step that you have to make calls, the authorizations don't go through. This also has to do with just getting prescriptions refilled. Just last week, it took a week for me to get a prescription refilled that I've had for many years. It's not like something new. Right. And so I think it's a very complex world that people with disabilities live in today.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us for this segment of the Better Care Forum. Please stay with us for further discussion of these important issues. And Tony, I know you had... Welcome back to the Better Care Forum discussion with our guests Donna, Tony, and Nancy. In an earlier segment, we talked about the Olmsted decision a little bit and some of the legal requirements the state now has. But I'm curious as to how this decision may affect people with disabilities in a day-to-day manner and how it may improve life for Californians with disabilities.
Well, I think the overall goal of Olmsted, the Olmsted decision and how it impacts California's citizens is to remove the institutional bias. Currently, anybody can go in a nursing home. That's typically where somebody goes after their stay in the hospital if they're not able to get up and go back to work or go back home. They go to a nursing home, and it's easy to get in. It's very difficult to get out. But you have to have a waiver to get that money to help them live in the community. And that's what we need to change, at least in my opinion, change that bias away from the institution and into the community. I mean, that's a summary of what Olmsted is. Sure. And the statewide Olmsted Task Force was set up by Health and Human Service Secretary Kim Belshea to really get a diverse group of folks together to look at all these issues. And it's definitely not all advocates on the disability side. There are nursing home advocates, there are healthcare advocates there, and we're really talking about issues. And California is a huge state. Sure. So it's easy to say, well, Oregon has a good model, or Washington or Minnesota or Wisconsin, but there's much smaller states, and they already have some programs set up that we don't have. So looking at what we have as our statewide infrastructure and making it work and setting up some pilot programs to try, I think, is where we're going. But primarily it's to look at folks and help them live where they choose to live.